Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and I hope that you love it. Sarah, welcome to the Storytelling Lab.
Thank you so much. It's great to be commensurating with another story nerd and excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. We love story nerds around here. It is our blood. So I've already been crying this morning watching some of your stories. We'll get into that as the conversation goes on. But I'm also excited to nerd out with another storyteller. But let's lay some foundation for folks for where the conversation is going to go today. Just start me off simple in lay people's terms, if you could. What exactly is Healium and how does it work?
So Healium is an immersive storytelling platform. So instead of just passively watching these experiences, you're feeling them with the data that comes from your fitness trackers. So what does that mean? It is immersive meditation that's uniquely powered by your body's electricity. And happy to go into more about what that means. But it is a new way to experience stories that are reactive and sentient to you as the user. And you have the ability to influence what you're seeing on the screen by changing your physiology, changing your breathing, your heart rate, all of those different kinds of biometric inputs.
So it requires your effort as well. Like you're not just sitting there passively.
Correct. You are downshifting your nervous system, the way you breathe. If you lower your heart rate, the environment changes.
Oh.
And so, no longer are stories linear, that, you are influencing what you're, and even, generating new content on the basis of that biometric data. And that data is easier than ever to get now because there are hundreds of millions of fitness trackers, smartwatches, EEG, meditation headbands out there. And that's what our technology does. It takes that biometric data and it can turn it into content. It can change the content so that it is reactive to you.
Yeah, I saw something that said people can see their feelings inside visual stories. That was the line that caught my attention first. I'm like, holy crap, what? I need to know more about what this is. So I'm just going to keep picking at that, if that's okay, of trying to understand and help people listening understand what exactly it is and what it does. So is it the product or is it a software?
It's software.
Okay.
And
so it can be used with these already existing products.
Right. Healium's APIs can be used with existing content. And we also have a mental fitness channel that we sell into areas of acute situational confined stress. So with traditional meditation, how do you know that you're doing it right? If you can't necessarily see your mind or your heart rate, how do you know you're calm?
Right.
I mean, if you are a traditional meditator, you might have an excellent mind-body connection and you know when you're calm. But if you're like me, or the millions of other people who struggle with sleep or anxiety, how are you supposed to learn to control what you can't see? And so Healium is adding that visual layer to the content, over the content, generating new content that's connected to your fitness trackers. So you have the ability to see your heart rate, to see your brain patterns in near real time, to know that when you slow your breathing, the environment changes. And it can change in a few different ways. So in the early days of our company, we had waveforms that were going up and down, like your heart rate or your brain patterns, and those waveforms would rise and fall. that quickly transitioned to assets that like 3D assets, a jaguar that would sit down right next to you, soften, and start to lick its paw. If the EEG headband that you were wearing, they're just little meditation headbands, or your fitness tracker like your Apple Watch, Samsung Galaxy Watch, Wear OS watch, if you were calm, then that environment would respond to you. And now, if you have an Apple Vision Pro, you can literally, and it sounds far-fetched, but it's like you're holding your heart rate or your brain patterns in your hands. So they're particle effects that you can actually see change in your hands according to your heart rate. So our technology is uniquely connecting that biometric data to content to make those environments sentient or have the ability to be sensed as opposed to just passively watched.
And is that content being pulled from a database, like a pre-created database, or is it generating new content?
Both.
Okay.
It can modify existing content. With AI, it can generate new content. And it can overlay, existing layers over content. It's just, again, no longer just passively watching the stories. There's the ability to feel them. And while that sounds far-fetched, if you think about the accessibility of all of those fitness trackers out there, it makes perfect sense that you would have a unique connection to in this personalized world, and the ability to generate personalized content for you, the user. That the days of searching for videos to make you calm on a video platform are being replaced with Rain. I sense from your fitness tracker that you're stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like some content to downshift your nervous system?
I would. Yes, I would.
Yeah. And with the rise of the opioid epidemic, this is a mental health emergency. It's the stress Olympics right now.
Eesh.
And not all of us have trained for it. And so these are just some drugless, non-harmful coping mechanisms. It's media, right? Just as media images can, be traumatic to a user. It's the same thing when you flip that on the head. Media can also heal and has healing properties and the ability to shift your brain patterns and shift your heart rate, away from that stress response. And so what we've done with Healium is not only create the content, create that unique connection between biometric data and content, but also the clinical validation in more than 9 peer-reviewed journals showing that these kinds of techniques, quickly downshift the nervous system. They're reducing anxiety. They're improving mood very quickly in as little as 4 minutes. So media is also medicine, in quotes. Helium's not designed to be diagnostic. It's not treatment or even a replacement for psychotropic medication. But in stressful situations, acute stress situations, it's something in a completely drugless way that can downshift.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying there. I wonder if, I like the point you made that it's not trying to replace these things. I feel like all of us, most of us, could benefit from it and are dealing with just that kind of day-to-day stress, anxiety. Do you think, I'm just thinking of this as I go, but those experiences, those feelings, anxiety, stress, et cetera, if untreated and we let them go, can lead to those things that need further treatment, more medical treatment, et cetera. Is that fair to say? Do you agree with that? Do you see where I'm going with
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. And you raise a really great point that it's like exercise.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Great
mental
point.
fitness. And, every day we go to the gym, right, and exercise our bodies. But what are we doing to keep our minds healthy?
Right.
And, these are tools that you can use in the privacy of your own home. You can use them at a gym. They're kits, they're portable. And, um, we should be doing those things because the connection between the mind and body has a direct impact on human performance. You have increased anxiety or increased stress. Well, you're reducing your working memory. You're
Mm.
increasing the likelihood of errors, and you're also increasing the likelihood that you make poor management decisions. So, I mean, the benefit to employers and also, individual consumers to have those mental fitness tools so that you don't have to later on,
Yeah.
do something that's maybe more of an intervention. And that's not to say this is a replacement for professional counseling, um,
No.
which is what we all know is one of the best things we can do for ourselves, or psychotropic medication, because there are some people who need that, and
Absolutely.
it's not a one size fits all. But it does have some value to users who want to learn to self-regulate.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to me, Sarah, and obviously I don't know it to the level that you do, but it sounds like it would one be like complementary to those other things and also and or preventative. That's where I'm landing on is like I feel like if I were to do something like this daily or, several times a week, it would help some of the potential catastrophes mentally that could come up when you just burn out, right? When you just get, too much. And for me personally, I agree with you. I mean, it's not even an agreement. Factually, there are people that, are diagnosed with issues that this probably can't solve in a medical sense. But for me personally, a lot of when I've sought out counseling and meditation and other things, it is to help me self-regulate because I can kind of get there. I struggle like everybody. So something like this is super appealing to me because one, it sounds like kind of a low lift. I mean, meditation is for some reason just daunting to folks if they don't if they don't transcend in the first 5 minutes. They're like, okay, I can't do it, But this seems like a little bit easier door to enter, perhaps. So I think it could be preventative for a lot of folks if they make it part of their fitness routine, as you say.
Yeah, and it's not one size fits all for meditation. There are different kinds of
Fair.
flavors, and whatever works for you,
Yeah.
you should do. And with helium, some people, you close your eyes and meditate, and you see nothing. Either you don't have that mind's eye, or you haven't learned to develop that mind's eye yet. And so you need visuals. I'm, one of those people who needs visuals, and so, developed it for me as well as the, millions of people who struggle with knowing, am I doing it right? And one of the things that we've learned through our research and researchers of others is that when you add that feedback loop, when you add the ability to see your own heart rate, brain patterns, in the future, skin conductance, blood pressure, whatever biodata, that experience is more memorable to the user
Hmm.
and it's more engaging. They do it longer, and then they can go back to it in a stressful situation. So, for instance, with that stress animal, that 3D jaguar that would, sit down right next to you, soften, and start to lick its paw, if your brain patterns or heart rate were calm. Even without goggles, even without a mobile device or any kind
Yeah.
of apparatus, you can still remember
Yes.
that story in your head, because stories are how we learn. It's how we make
Absolutely.
sense of the world. And so that's a narrative that you can, and a visual narrative you can put in your head, that it's
Yeah.
not, oh my gosh, I need to calm down. I'm stressed. I need to, quiet. It's, I need to tame my stress animal.
Yeah.
And you've seen that before, so you can imagine you have the muscle memory of the physiology to know what you need to
Yeah. It
downshift.
is completely full circle then. So you use helium, slow your breathing down, get in a calm state, have that visual, that story that you then is, logged here. We know from storytelling, science is, has proven that you can recall it much easier. That's why we deliver information in stories. I know you and I know that. But then when you're in a situation like, let's say I'm going to Thanksgiving, I get stressed out in a couple of days and I need to calm myself, I can revisit that story to get to that space. Is that basically what you're saying?
Absolutely. And
So powerful.
yeah, and there are 40 different stories on the platform. So some of them are, one of my favorites is you're floating through the aurora borealis.
Oh my gosh.
And then all of a sudden you have, it's like you're floating through space. And then you have all of a sudden these humpback whales that start sliding by you on either side and are gliding next to you. Very calming experience. And you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not in space. I'm underwater.
Mm-hmm.
And so, different little surprises of that. And, we have another experience called Tree of Life. And, you're in one, and I won't give it all away, but you're, in one experience, and then you realize, oh, I'm not where I thought I was. I'm actually, in this other place. But, physically and from a memory perspective, imagining when you're in a stressful situation, okay, my humpback whales are coming on either side of me. Or we have another experience called a cosmic turtle that, is going towards the ocean. Little stories that you can tell yourself. And now with AI, the ability to create your own stories and actually talk.
So I imagine you're starting to integrate a lot of that into your product as well.
Yes. And the ability to talk to it, generate new content, and then from your bio data, that it can also, sense what you need and serve it back up to you.
Oh man, that's super cool. When I'm thinking of meditating, like and I've been better at times and worse at times with my practice. If I'm by myself, it's very challenging. If I have a guide listening to audio, it's like the next level up. It's a little easier for me to get in that zone. Never before have I thought or had the opportunity to utilize visuals in that. So I can imagine how much more powerful that would be, because I already see the difference in audio and nothing, just my own mind. And we know that visual narratives are extremely powerful anyway. You and I both know that. Are you familiar with Dr. Paul Zak on the West Coast?
I've heard that name before, but remind me why.
He's an educator and a speaker at Claremont Graduate University. He's been on the show of neuroeconomics, but he wrote a lot of books about the neurochemicals that are elevated when you watch stories, and talks a lot about and has a lot of data on visual stories specifically. And I'll link you up with his stuff after we get off, because I think you'd be really interested in. There's a lot of overlap in the work that you are all doing, but he's been in the lab for decades and is one of the great voices for neuroscience and storytelling, and really establishing that intersection. But that his study on the visual component of story and how it made it so much stronger came to mind just now. I like how we're talking.
Yeah, the brain believes what it sees.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
So if when you're inside the goggles or even on your mobile device, that you're not in the aurora borealis with whales, but your body is responding like you are at the beach. And with helium, we've never had a researcher look at the neurochemicals, but through brain maps, EEG brain maps, you can see significant shifts in the fast activity in the brain. And this isn't just with meditation headband, consumer grade headbands. This is with full, cap and glue on EEG.
Yeah.
Looking at how these experiences impact the brain. So yeah, would love to nerd out with him and learn
Oh,
more.
absolutely. He would basically monitor people watching movies, for example, and see what neurochemicals were elevated in, a James Bond or like Rocky film where there's a lot of like adrenaline or a scary movie or something like that. So yeah, you would definitely nerd out with him about it. Now, I like how we're focusing on the positive aspects of media. It's a tool, right? There's positive and negative ways that we can use it. And I know that your background is in journalism. A lot of great storytellers come from that background. I want to ask you a couple of questions. One, we know that a lot of the responsibility in news outlets are to share stories. A lot of times those stories are of negative events that are happening to bring light to them. So the first question is kind of a two-part question is, what are the positive things or the pros of having that role and responsibility to share those often negative stories around the world? Shootings, refugees, things like that are a little heavy, that could be traumatic. From your experience, what are the positives of having that role of sharing those stories?
Mhm. So I spent decades as a television journalist, and the positives. Okay, let's start with the positives.
Right. It's a two-part question.
Yeah, loved my career. Got to meet amazing people and people who trusted us with their stories, which
Mhm.
is one of the your most intimate possessions that you have is your story. And so, the ability to see, little known organization or causes or individuals who once you told their story and they had story, they then had a platform with which they could share around the world and people could learn about it. So that, for me, working as a TV reporter, and we covered a variety of things. I mean, yes, we chased ambulances, every single day, rapes, murders, homicides. We went in with the trauma teams and the aftermath of the tsunami in Sri Lanka and Indonesia, but from a positive perspective. When I think, of all of the stories that, we told over the years, media has the ability to, scale narratives. It has the ability to heal, and stories have the ability to educate
That part.
people, to learn, to create empathy. A unique sense of empathy. So, yeah, that was absolutely a positive highlight in my
Absolutely.
career.
I mean, it's a big responsibility to bear, but people like me or the audience need to hear those stories, and without someone like you, we can't. So the part about scaling that story, getting it across, educating people, creating empathy, is absolutely vital. Now, the second part of the question, which is where I was leading us, which I ultimately leads to the story of you creating this, which is where I want to go with that. Um, Talk to me about your personal experience with the flip side of that coin, of seeing all of these stories, telling all of these stories, which is not so fun, knowing that where we're going with this is what came out of that. But I do want to hear part of your personal story because I think it's really important how you navigated that, and it's important for other people to hear that.
Yeah. So, worked in local television news and radio for decades, and as I said, we covered a lot of trauma. Sadly, as a journalist, you have to sometimes cover the worst day of somebody's life and then go out and do it again tomorrow. I remember as an early reporter, one of the very first stories we covered was a triple homicide, in my community. And you see things that, sometimes you don't always forget. And when it comes to experiencing trauma, those reporters, every single day, they're seeing trauma. And it's not just seeing it with your eyes, it's also hearing those stories of the people that you're interviewing. And, one of the things that really I struggled with, and I really struggled with it after, I had my own children, was, interviewing people who've lost children. And that is like, the worst. And, I don't know how, reporters are dealing with that today, but back in my day, there was no talk
Right.
about, okay, let's talk about what you saw. There was no bringing in, counselors. It was, yeah, we need you to interview this, mother who lost her child, and knocking on doors and having to, just these horrendous, difficult conversations. And what you found was, obviously, some of these individuals and parents, didn't want to share, but then there were some who did. Like they wanted the story of their loved one to be remembered and memorialized. And so, that was the hardest thing. It wasn't seeing the blood or, dead bodies. Um, but back in my day, in the newsrooms, it'd be like, okay, whose turn is it to go witness the execution?
Oh, geez.
At the at the prison. So reporters are subjected to that every single day, and again, it's not the seeing; it's the hearing of that, and then also reading it every day. I mean, listen to the news every night, wherever you get your news. There's someone who has to read that, look at the video, and you get desensitized to
Yeah.
it over and over again. But ultimately, if, journalists and reporters or anybody else who's dealing with trauma doesn't have a mental fitness routine, to get out that negative narrative out of their head, that's going to manifest itself in insomnia, poor relationships,
Mm.
all of the, more than 60% of all illness and disease is caused by anxiety and stress. And it's not just, a little stress. And so, yeah, that was, a very positive and also, a very negative experience in my life. And I was just a local news reporter, right? I wasn't going to a war zone. I mean,
Right.
we did go and cover natural disasters, like the aftermath of the tsunami. And we did stories about people in Africa who have to crawl on the ground because they lacked access to wheelchairs. You know, we went to Guatemala and did a story about a child who was starving, and then she eventually, she
Mm.
died. And so anyway, you can tell today, I mean, it's been, long time, but those stories stay with you in a positive way, but they can also manifest themselves in a very negative way if you don't have some, drugless, non-harmful coping mechanisms. And that's just the premise behind Helium. Do this, not that.
Yeah. And it did impact you that way as well, right? Weren't you were feeling physical effects from all of that? Is that what led to you kind of leaving that industry?
Yeah, it's very common for journalists. A lot of stories of, mine was insomnia. I just couldn't quiet my
Mm.
mind at night, and had, ruminating thoughts, that I couldn't downshift. And so I turned to neurofeedback, biofeedback, which is, a very old practice, and um, uh, essentially a software program that back in the day when I did it, you had to glue electrodes on your head, right? And then watched a very boring, waveform going up and down the screen. And so, as a storyteller, I created stories in my head to make it less boring. Okay, I'm cooling my jets, with the little airplane that you go up and down. And to make a long story short, uh, that combination of neurofeedback, biofeedback, and story, formed that the basis of Helium today. It's story-driven, narratives that are powered by your biometric data.
Uh, it's it's an interesting point you kind of landed on. unintentionally of just, you saw the up and down motion, and as a storyteller, you naturally just started putting a narrative to it. I often talk about, that's really all storytelling is, right? It's just up and down, increasing tension, releasing the tension, et cetera, et cetera. And so I love that visual of you just seeing the line, and you can't help but think of it as like, oh, it's a plane. I'm cooling my jets.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a, visual storyteller, I loved to video edit, still do. Really enjoy that. And so that visual nature of it was more engaging for me than like feeling it from a haptic or having that audio only. I needed to see it in order to be able to recall it back later in my mind. And, eventually I was able to find relief, not from constantly doing those programs, but from having that, positive narrative in my head that I could go back to, in a stressful situation. And now with Healium, like, there are, so many worlds. And what we find with some of the populations that Healium is used for, so, one of them is with victims of violence in the world, gender-based violence, particularly. And for some of these women, their psychologists tell us that they struggle with when they tell them, okay, let's imagine a safe place. They struggle with what that is because they've never felt safe. And so, you and I, we might imagine a beach or a peaceful forest or the aurora borealis,
Right.
something that's peaceful and safe, but they don't have that narrative. They don't have that story in their head. And so they're using Healium to provide them a visual of
Yeah.
this is what a safe place looks like. And then they're able to, recall that in stressful situations. So it's really, if you will, in planning a stored memory, a positive stored memory, and surrounding them in that, so that they can go back to it. So beyond just the biodata integrations, there's power in creating that positive visual for someone.
That's such a great point that I hadn't considered until right now, of like, I don't have a visual to go to. Like I do. I might have to dig around a little bit through my current stress or whatever, but it's there. I have visuals and places and memories that I could go back to, but that's a pretty profound point that's not everyone does. And so if you can help create those places for them, there's a lot of power behind that. I know another one of the groups that you work with specifically is veterans. I know that after you left the news, you went to work with a Veterans United, I believe. This is what I was watching this morning before our conversation that had me like tearing up over here, and I'm like, damn it, Sarah. I think it was one of the ones that you might have posted on Veterans Day. That was like an honor flight. Is that what it's called? Am I saying
Yeah,
that
yeah.
correctly? Yeah. So, but I want to establish that because after you left the news, you went and had this really cool role with veterans and using your storytelling skills. Can you tell me like how that transition, took you from the broadcast journalism to creating this product? I see that there's a tie-in, but I'd love for you to tell me about that.
Yeah, certainly was not a linear path. And
Right.
the Veterans United Foundation was one of the great stops along my journey, that I got to tell some really phenomenal stories because they're doing really, really important work there. But we created a volunteer program for aging and terminally ill veterans that couldn't physically travel to see their memorials in Washington, D.C. on what's called honor flights. Honor Flight is a great program that provides physical flights. It's flying veterans for free so that they can visit their memorials in Washington, D.C. because, we're losing these vets at a rate of hundreds a day nationwide. And sadly, a lot of them have passed away before getting the opportunity to see them. But what we noticed gosh, this might have been 2011, is that we needed an alternative. And so we started using our mobile devices in order to, we were broadcasters, right? It's like we
Yeah.
can broadcast, do a live shot from the memorial so they can see it. And so we were live streaming from our phones back to assisted living centers in 2011, 2010, so that they could, see a live stream. We would walk through the memorials. But what we found is we needed new tools, and Google had come out with Google Glass. So then we used Google Glass, and we were the arms and the legs of the veteran. Go up to the relief panels, touch the relief panels for me, and it was like you were embodying what they wanted, and you would walk through the memorials, and through your eyes, they could see what they wanted to see. But obviously, scaling that to be able to reach at the time, they were losing 500 veterans a day, World War II veterans a day, and we could not possibly get to all of them. So, Google came out with Google Cardboard, which allowed, the portable ways. And so we started creating immersive experiences. I wanted to do more of that. And obviously, Veterans United is a great organization. They're a mortgage company.
Right, I saw that.
And so I left in order to do more in that immersive space, which they applauded, and they were great supporters of ours throughout the process. But that's what led me is doing all these virtual tours with veterans. And seeing how immersive media impacted their physiology. And in any of those videos that you watch, when the veteran takes off the goggles for the first time, they weren't just watching those experiences, they were feeling them. And the emotional impact of, putting someone inside the story. The world is no longer flat. It's a place through, story that you can step into and experience it. And, that was, one of the aha moments for me, is that this new medium at the time, what was that? Immersive media had the power to impact physiology.
Yes, I was going to go there. Please take me there.
So we started testing to see how different stories impact brain patterns, heart rate, skin conductance. We did a lot with aroma in integrating aroma into stories, and see how it shifts brain patterns. And aroma impacts the brain far more deeply than any other input. You would pick up like a lavender stalk inside the story, and you see the shifts in the brain maps whenever they put the lavender stalk to their nose. And so my co-founder, Dr. Jeff Tarrant, look up his work with neuromeditation. He's the founder of the Neuromeditation Institute. And he started doing brain maps, before and after experiences. And I'll, never forget, one of the first ones that he sends to us. It's like, you're not going to believe this. Look at these significant shifts, before and after these experiences. So clearly, it was having a significant impact on physiology. And there are, publications, a lot of peer-reviewed research, not just with Healium, but with others, showing that VR can be just as effective as a dose of hydromorphidone or Dilaudid, which is a powerful painkiller. And so, this whole trend of media as medicine is real. It's peer reviewed, and it's visual, it's real time, and it's unlocking an entirely new layer of storytelling by, integrating these biometric inputs.
I love that line, media as medicine, because we only often hear the negative sides of media, right? But this is such a positive way to utilize it. Also want to just say shout out to Veterans United, because like how forward thinking of them, as they're a mortgage company, right? to use storytelling or allow you to use storytelling in this manner, which doesn't seem directly connected to what they do, what they offer, but it absolutely is. As a storyteller, I know they're like, yeah, you serve veterans. Why wouldn't you be telling veteran stories? But it's so cool because a lot of companies, especially companies, I don't want to say like that. That sounds, the connotation is terrible, but traditional companies will say don't see that connection, and I'm sure that you help them see that. But shout out to them for trusting you to do that. It's so powerful, and obviously it was. I wanted to ask you. You seem to have always had this. Been slightly ahead of the curve at the intersection of storytelling and technology, which is impressive to me because I have not. Who helped cultivate that in you? Like, who were some mentors or inspirations in the younger version of Sarah? I feel like there has to be someone who helped you find how to navigate those two worlds as well as you have.
Mhm. So probably early college, professors at the Missouri School of Journalism, the University of Missouri School of Journalism, one of the oldest journalism schools in the nation, and it has a really impressive past of, attracting a lot of thought leaders as professors, and so a variety of different people. I mean, as a journalist, you have to be a futurist in a way, in being able to peer around the corners, but you also have to have a high level of digital literacy. And that was, one of the things early on. Your digital footprint started, from day one. It's funny, my daughter, who's, now almost 30 and has her first child, and her career is in SEO now. And she always tells me, Mom, I used to laugh at you when you were talking about be mindful of your digital footprint. Like, you're building it now. And now she realizes, yeah, it absolutely is the case.
Mom was right.
I had a professor named Mike McKean, who back in the day talked about the information superhighway, right?
Yeah.
That it was going to be, an old listservs with Veronica. And so was instilled at that in a very early age in my career, that these new digital tools have the ability to have you jump over, get information faster, and we're essentially broadcast sticks in the middle of crowdsourcing tools. And that's what social media was. It was a broadcast tower in the middle of, the ability to generate an audience, which was, really unique. So I embraced, whatever technology, whatever storytelling tools we could. And then I also spent some time as teaching at the Missouri School of Journalism, and they, the students are working on alongside some of their newscasters and reporters. But it started there, and continued to be cultivated when that rise of social media came up. We formed a broadcast, an interactive broadcast, where I wore two IFBs. One, it was like a live video chat, which this was before the days of,
I saw
we
this.
all were in Zoom, and the audience could, talk to me during the newscast. And that was a great learning experience on how you work with new technology, how you try to educate people, and also too, that if you don't have a business model for it, it is not going to survive. So this interactive newscast via social media, I don't know, it might have been in like 2009 or 2010, like way, way early. But it was very fascinating for me to be able to hear my own audience in my ear.
That's wild.
And you would say something and they'll be like, I don't think that was right.
Yeah.
Double check that.
I was going to say, did it backfire at all?
No, it didn't backfire, but it did allow us to have very instantaneous
Yeah,
corrections.
that's cool.
Because in one story I said millions, and they're like, I think that's billions. and then we were able to say, and actually that wasn't 10 million, it was 10 billion.
And if you're vulnerable enough or open enough, flexible enough to receive that in real time, it could be really powerful. I can imagine some people, would be resistant, but if you were malleable enough, that could be a really cool tool.
Yeah, and they were good. They had trained themselves on when they could,
Okay.
say things so as not to hijack. But they had
Okay.
a little fun with like reading the dictionary while I was, trying to do the news to see if they could like throw me off or anything like that. But yeah, it was a great learning experience, and yeah, we really enjoyed that.
What about like the young version of Sarah? Like, did you know that you wanted to do this type of work? Were you into stories as a kid? What'd you want to be when you were younger?
I mean, some of my first jobs, I was a lifeguard, I was a waitress, I worked at a printing factory. And when I was in high school, I covered sports for my
Ah.
local newspaper. So, and the reason why I did that is because a very cute boy came to my seventh grade science class. He had just got out of a basketball,
Uh-huh.
and he was all sweaty in his basketball uniform, and asked if I wanted to write sports for the high school newspaper. I'm like, yeah,
Well, I hadn't thought about it till this very second.
yeah. But actually, that boy, I married that boy.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Stop
so
playing.
30 years of marriage, and so he always jokes that he launched my journalism
Good. He should take credit for that. I would do the same thing.
career. Yeah, but it led up to that, and then to pay my way through college, worked at local NPR radio
That's
affiliates,
cool.
ABC affiliates,
That's awesome.
CBS and NBC affiliates.
So, what does it feel like now? I mean, obviously, like we were just talking about, you've always incorporated technology into your storytelling practice, but now you're an entrepreneur. What is that? How has that transition been for you?
So journalists make great entrepreneurs
How
because
so?
you're not just selling your product, you're selling your stories, right? And so that's what we're doing. We're selling a very unique kind of story that has the ability to heal. And we sell our products into areas of acute situational confined stress. Some of the largest brands in the world are some of Healium's customers. And then we also license that technology that can enable other storytellers to do the same thing. But it was a little bit of a dichotomy between how a journalist thinks and how an entrepreneur thinks. A journalist thinks, I just need to share everything. I need to tell you everything and
Hmm.
give it away. Like here, like you're just you constantly want to give away information. And with an entrepreneur, obviously, that has to be gated under a business model
Hmm.
of, under what scenarios, in what locations are you giving away that information. So it was, great to have those digital skills. And in, the early days, I mean, I shot our very first stories,
That's awesome.
um, and was a one person. Some of our earliest experiences, I shot all over the world, and that was great for me to learn the business aspect as well as story.
I saw one post where you were working with a football program. It might have been Missouri. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
How were you
So
using Helium with them? I'm curious.
a few years ago, we won the NFL Players Association pitch competition.
Oh, very cool.
It's an innovation program that they have. So helium is used with some elite athlete teams, football, baseball, and you might have seen some experiences that we were doing with a university football program.
Hmm.
But yes, elite athletes use helium for mental fitness, because you reduce
Yes.
anxiety
Oh my God.
or self-regulate stress, you improve your human performance. And so there's definitely a correlation between value with story and elite athletes.
So where were you in my scoring slump for my men's soccer league when I couldn't put it in the back of the net for like 4 games in a row? I needed this, is what you're
Right.
telling me.
And someday I have no doubt we will see Healium, or maybe another intervention on the sidelines at a football game and in the dugout.
That's such a big part
Because
of athletic performance is here.
the ability to instantly interrupt that stress response, the crowd's going wild, and how are you downshifting that nervous system? And what visual are you using for that? So it's just a matter of time, because it's not just ice that they need on their ankle, or
No.
something on their shoulder brace. The mind is one of the most important parts of the body. And so a lot of these teams already have mental fitness coaches
Yeah.
that are focused on that. And certainly with a lot that's happening with TBI and traumatic brain injury,
Yeah.
it's important that you don't just treat, but that you create resilience and have those drugless tools to make an impact on teaching them how to learn to self-regulate.
Absolutely. And as a lifelong athlete, I love the cultural shift that we are seeing, meditation and yoga and all of these other things, mindfulness, that are being brought into that high performance athletic, society is so important. And I love to see it. And how cool that you're like full circle now, working with athletes where you first started as a young storyteller, young journalist.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right.
Measured mindfulness. That's a way to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question. The first reason that I found you and wanted to reach out to you was from your role as, like it says on your LinkedIn profile, chief storyteller. Now, obviously, you're the chief storyteller at the company you founded, but you were also that role at Veterans United, which we've talked about today. And that's a role that's been around for a while, but it is growing. We're seeing it more frequently in different companies. So I wanted to ask, how do you define that role? Think about someone from a smaller company and they are having to play that role. What are the responsibilities? You're not just making content, social media content. If you consider yourself a chief storyteller or chief storytelling officer, as some people say, what are the things that you are really focused on for that brand, for that company?
So it's really being a reporter in your own organization and looking for stories that aren't just about your product, but about everything that touches your product, from the people who are creating that product to the people who are using that product. And that's really important. And in all of my chief storyteller roles, including at my own company, that's how I've approached that position. My title is CEO/chief storyteller. And as many CEOs, if you don't have the budget to hire a chief storyteller, you have to become a chief storyteller and become very good at telling your story, telling the story of the people who work with you and on your product, and also telling the stories of the people who are using your product. And so, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see stories of all of those different kinds of individuals, because you can place an ad all day long till you're blue in the face, but if it doesn't come from a narrative of or an emotion of people, how they are using it, that is far greater from an effectiveness level when it's housed in the realm of story. So all companies need chief storytellers, and if you don't know where to find them, hire a former journalist. They know how to create stories that get the media's attention. They know how to craft press releases to get the media's attention because they were the media. and they know how the media has an attention span of a gnat. They know how you have to craft them. None of this parenthetical phrases. You just circle the main points and put it in bullet points. And then the very end, you have, why should I care? Because that's what all the assignment editors ask, right? Why should I care? And also create, visuals and in those media releases, providing opportunities to talk to real people so that those media storytellers can create their own stories. But yeah, I hope that career takes off in the future, because it's such a huge value add.
And like you said, if you can't designate a person for that, somebody needs to be addressing the responsibilities of that role somehow.
Yeah, and not just defining what the story is, but visual storytellers are super helpful.
Absolutely.
People who can craft that in video narratives.
Absolutely. Totally agreed. That is a perfect place to end our conversation today. Sarah, thank you so much. And I will reach out to you after this because I'm really interested in trying Healium. I am one of the many people that I think would benefit from this. And I just got to say, I'm super inspired by your whole journey in creating this. As someone who's a storyteller, visual storyteller as well, who's told traumatic stories that still I carry with me. I'm very inspired by what you've done with your skills and your experience, and I'd love to try it.
Well, thank you. We have a great team of storytellers here. A lot of people might not think of data engineers as storytellers, or product engineers, or even neurofeedback specialists. All of these are unique storytelling inputs that you can tell stories with data. You can tell stories with biometric data, and it's a really exciting time to be in that industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show.